Good evening. Good evening. How's that? Is that good? Not used to this nice facility, a little bigger than our normal room. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out on this very cold January night. Just to start off quickly, because I know not everybody... Okay. I got to talk directly into it. All right, I got it. Getting used to the new technology. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Before we get started, just because I know everybody is not familiar with town government, I'm just going to run down who's sitting up here. So on the Board of Selectmen, we have John Carlson, Peter Adams, myself, Dave Ross, I'm the chairman, John Dowling, and Brooke Paget. And then sitting next to Mr. Paget is Tim McInerney, who is our town administrator, and Kevin Mizikar, who's our assistant town administrator. So we're here tonight to give all the residents an update on the current federal court case that the town has with the Grafton Upton Railroad regarding preemption, and to also hear residents' concerns. In order to protect the water supply and preserve our zoning, we're taking every action we can to prevent the tanks from coming into town. However, if preemption is determined by the federal court and the facility is allowed to be constructed, the town will work to make this the safest possible facility. I'm going to ask the town administrator to give everybody an update on what's happened over the last couple of weeks and the current schedule for the court case. After that, I will be moderating the discussion portion of the evening. I'm going to ask that if you have a question, you come to one of these two microphones up front. Part of that is so everybody in the auditorium can hear you, and also we are recording this so it can be replayed on the local TV for those who can't make it. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and address so we all can be friends here and know who everybody is. So I'm going to ask Mr. McInerney if he can give us a quick update on what is currently going on with the courts.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm Tim McInerney. I'm town administrator. As you may know, January 14th, we have a court case before the federal court regarding preemption for the Grafton and Upton Railroad. We did issue a cease and desist on December 12th. That was not followed by the Grafton Upton Railroad. We issued the cease and desist because we learned that the tanks were imminent to be delivered from Fall River to Grafton. We did go to court as a result of the Grafton Upton Railroad failing to follow that cease and desist. And we went there on the 12th and were granted temporarily injunctive relief. The case was moved to federal court, and we had a hearing on the 21st of December. After a discussion for about an hour and a half, the judge set a hearing date. We were a little bit surprised by this, but I think it's good news because ultimately, if you went to a different agency, you would end up in federal court anyways. So it's probably good that it just ended at the last place it would have ended anyways and saved us a step. So the 14th, we have a hearing date set for January 14th. We think it'll be between 4 and 6 days long. We are in the process now currently of getting all of our documents together relative to correspondence, if we've had any, and so forth, legal disclosure, and a number of other requests for documents that have been requested by opposing counsel. Once we, backing up to the injunction in the court case, once we learned of the date being set for January 14th, we notified everybody we possibly could, from DEP, EPA, the Fire Marshal's Office, Congressional Delegation, Division of Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, the GMEA, everybody that you could imagine. We took a shotgun approach to this to make sure everybody knew that we had done this. And soon after, within days of issuing our cease and desist, the Fire Marshal issued one, and so did the DEP. The DEP's is more of an administrative order. Currently, it's under appeal by the Grafton Upton Railroad, so the timelines and the direction that's given in that document are not, or don't have to be adhered to until that appeal process is done. So I know there's a lot of information, but I'm just going to try and give you a general overview. We have recently made formal requests for documentations from the Grafton and Upton Railroad regarding plans or stamped engineering drawings that they have to date. We have not received any to date. And that's been kind of our biggest problem, is we just don't have a lot of information regarding formal plans or intention for this parcel. I do want to acknowledge the board and its courage to authorize and support me and our staff issuing the cease and desist back on the 12th of December. And all the staff who did a lot of legwork and documentation and running around getting that cease and desist served, and then following up with the court. Once we knew the cease and desist was not going to be followed, we had to do a number of things at state court and then subsequently to federal court. So I want to thank, obviously, the building inspector. Kevin did a great job. The chief was there the whole way. There's a lot of other administrative staff that helped. Our legal counsel, who's not here tonight because obviously she's preparing for a major trial that's happening on the 14th. So we gave her some reprieve from tonight. And currently we're preparing to put on the best case possible for the 14th. So we can, I'll just turn it back to you, Dave.
All right, thank you, Tim. Just before we open up the discussion portion, as Tim was saying, and we all know we're dealing with this pending trial. So there are going to be certain things that the board will be unable to comment on. So we're more than willing to listen to all of your concerns. We're going to take notes on them. We'll comment on as much as we can, but there may be certain things where we, in essence, almost have to plead the fifth. So don't take that as a cavalier attitude on our part or that we don't care. This is a public meeting. Anybody can be here. I'm sure there are people here that either work for or support the railroad in this endeavor. So we just want to, in essence, keep some of that information close to the vest until the 14th. So just please have that understanding that we're not blowing off any concern or issue you may have. We may be aware of it, and we're just unable to comment on it at that time. And we'll try to say something along those regards, that we're aware of it, but we can't comment. So whoever wants to step up to the microphone first and ask the first question. If not, we can all go home.
Good evening. My name's Jacqueline Brosnahan. My family and I live at 80 North Main Street. Over the past 2 years, we have watched the Upton Railroad destroy the back portion around the pond, where they claim that they were going to do minimal invasive construction to the back, and instead we have a massive giant rock pit. So with this new propane tank system that's supposedly coming in using old tanks, I will get to a question, I promise you. I would like to just read a short report from a propane explosion that happened recently, and my question will relate to the safety of the residents around this propane area. The Toronto propane explosion, also known as the Sunrise propane incident, was a series of explosions and ensuing fire that took place on the morning of August 10, 2008, in the Downsview community of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The explosions occurred at the Sunrise Propane Industrial Gases propane facility in the Keele Street and Wilson Avenue area of North York around 3:50 Eastern Time. The blasts caused thousands of people to be evacuated from their homes and cost $1.8 million to clean up, half of which was paid by the province of Ontario. An employee of Sunrise died in the initial explosions, and a firefighter died of cardiac arrest the next day while at the scene. So this is not an unusual incident, a propane explosion. There's documentations of many explosions that have happened across this country as well as other countries. What steps are you taking as selectmen to protect the residents that have already lost a lot of money in property value due to this particular individual, who we come back once again here to discuss when he tried to put a truck depot down there, and now we're faced with this lowering of our property values, and with the propane tanks potentially coming in, do you all have a plan to protect the residents? Because we cannot afford to be evacuated from our home. We cannot afford to lose our home. My insurance for my home will go up. And no one will want to buy my home in the current condition that we're facing the big rock pile, let alone a huge propane facility. That's my question.
I can answer saying definitively there's no written safety plan where we've known about this proposal since mid-November, so we're going as fast as we can on it. The facility under law has to be built to, I believe I'm quoting it correct, I think it's NFP 58, that's the National Fire Protection Code, and will have to be certified by our own fire department and the state fire marshal. We've been told by the railroad company's consultant that they're building it to the highest possible safety level. Obviously, there is always the possibility of some type of human error, no matter how many fail-safes you have. To us, right now, part of the reason we've gone through federal court and issued this cease and desist is we think that this facility is not preempt, which means it can't even be built. And if we're correct on that point, then not to be cavalier or to disregard what you're saying, the other things become moot. But we are very concerned about the safety, and we need to work through that. I mean, the numbers we've heard in terms of the size of the blast radius are very, very concerning. I think I speak for most of the board when I say that, if not all of us. And but we will be working going forward, building that safety plan, making sure that our first responders are trained to the highest level to be able to cover that. But as you know, we can't remove every risk unless we prevent the facility from being built.
Well, I certainly hope that the entire Board of Selectmen and the Economic Committee take into consideration that the residents of Grafton deserve a lot more economic security by preventing and not even allowing this to even begun in our town. This is a small town. This is not a huge city, and there's not a lot of land where they can go build something like this. This is right in my backyard. And I have to say that I am disappointed that now I'm learning these facts when this stuff was started back in November. And at that time is when the rallying cry should have started, and it didn't. And now you're going to court, and it's almost like the horse is out of the barn, and it's almost too late. So I would sincerely hope that you all are extremely aggressive and start working on your safety plan now, because they have a lot of money, and we're going to end up losing. So I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
My name is Richard Cedar. I'm a retired public health physician living in Grafton. Sorry. I have several questions about the plan and the geometry and geography of it. Start by asking, is it unusual to have 4 80,000-gallon tanks in one location? Sounds like a lot to me, a large volume.
Yes.
That's unusual.
Yes.
What is the service area that they're trying to serve with that kind of facility? All of Worcester?
I'm unaware of how large that service area would be. That's a question for the railroad.
Okay. I had a couple other questions. Does the company who puts in that kind of facility have the responsibility of having insurance to guarantee payment to people whose homes could be blown up or otherwise adversely affected?
I can't answer that 100%. I know they have to carry a multi-million-dollar liability policy. So I'm not sure, I would assume that that would cover any damage to other individuals' properties.
I may have some more questions pretty soon. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Mike Everett, and I live at 37 Flint Pond Drive. I have a little question. I'm surprised that the fire chief isn't here tonight, because a lot of the things are safety concerns, or at least my questions, and it would have been nice to have somebody who's going to ultimately have to deal with that. But the question I have is, does the Grafton Fire Department have adequate resources to respond to an appropriate fire response if something goes on with this facility?
We think we do. We think in any fire response, there's always mutual aid that we rely on as a call fire department, volunteer fire department. So it's difficult to answer. I'm saying yes because I know that these guys have gone in and done pretty extraordinary things, and with a lean crew and lean budgets and so forth. We rely on mutual aid. We will make sure, if this goes through, and we have to have this discussion, I will tell you that your emergency management agency, your public fire, police, myself, have been in meetings relative to what are the preemptive steps to make this a state-of-the-art safe facility above and beyond what's required by the code. So leak detection, flame detection, water cannons that would be on-site that could be controlled remotely and so forth. So, but we need to see those plans and actually argue for those particular pieces. So we think we have some expertise in-house. We will go outside once we have a full set of plans so we can critique it. We also have the fire marshal's office that is helping to review and comment and guide our volunteer staff on these matters as well. But short answer is yes, but we will rely on mutual aid, there's no doubt about it.
Well, I understand mutual aid, but if this is as serious of an issue as we're talking about, if the Grafton Fire Department has to, either expand personnel or buy additional equipment to support this facility, I would think you'd turn towards the business that's causing this and ask for them to help fund some of these and not leave it up to the taxpayers. So I would just request the selectmen, to consider that if additional resources, either human resources or, additional fire trucks or equipment need to be provided, that, as a town, we would, request them to help supplement whatever additional resources are necessary. The other issue, I don't know if you guys have discussed it, but what is the impact of this facility on traffic patterns? I've seen the roads and traveled over them many times. You can barely put 2 cars on it, and they're not even paved that well. So I'm just curious to how many deliveries are planned today and what's that going to do to traffic patterns. Harvey's had an issue in Westboro with traveling people through town, and it was a very serious concern. And with that many tanks and that many trucks on the low capacity of the roads that are around there, I think it's a major safety concern for just, the traffic that's going to be in the area. And I haven't heard anything regarding the number of deliveries and or whether or not the roads are really geared to handle the traffic that is being planned.
The railroad company has proposed the following truck route. The trucks will come down, I don't know what the name of that road is, off of the new road that connects Route 20 near Hebert's Candy Mansion, Centec Boulevard. They will come down Centec Boulevard, past the train station, make a right onto Westboro or Waterville Street, travel down past Curtis, make a right onto Westboro Road and pull into the facility that way, and then we'll exit back out that way. As far as the current bridges and culverts in that area, there have been no inspections done yet to state what the weight limit is and whether or not it can support tanker trucks. And what we've been told is the only trucks visiting this facility will be the large tanker trucks, not the small little, like Osterman propane trucks you see going around.
Okay. My last question is, I'm wondering what the impact of the storage tanks will have on fire insurance rates, and whether or not we'll have to pay additional premiums for, if we live in the vicinity of it. And I'm curious if you have any input of whether or not the residents will have to bear additional, premiums related to the proximity of this facility.
I don't have anything definitive on that. That's probably going to be insurance carrier by insurance carrier. I could see how there could be increases, and I could see where there may not be increases. So unfortunately, I can't provide you any guidance on that.
All right, thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sharon Searles, and I live at 98 North Main Street for the last 28 years. And I have two questions. One of them is in concern to the 4 80,000-gallon propane tanks. Has anybody considered that it may be more than that eventually? I think we should keep that option open because we haven't gotten any true answers from that gentleman yet. Second question is, when he's switching cars at the end of the street, North Westboro Road, he throws flares down. Is there any regard to putting up, the actual arms that come down to stop vehicles? We've had, people come to visit us that are coming up the street, and all of a sudden they just stop cold because there's flares on the road. What's the deal with that?
Thank you. Flares?
Flares. He throws flares on the road in order to stop the traffic, knowing that there's a car that could be crossing, train car.
That's the first the board has heard of that. We were under the impression flagmen were being used at all crossings.
Well, nighttime activities, you'll see the flares still flying around down there. But my main concern is the 80,000-gallon tanks, 4 times what in the future?
Yeah, all the plans we've seen to date are just those 4 tanks.
Okay.
We know he's only, or one of the companies affiliated with him has only purchased those 4 tanks down in, I think, the Fall River area.
Okay, just want to keep it in your
Yep.
mind that, the neighbors are concerned that it could be more eventually.
Thank you.
Good evening. Yeah, my name's Ed Thorne, and I live in Flint Pond Estates. I'm one of the newcomers here, but I travel past this road, same location twice a day. So I go past it on my way to work and on my way home. And the flares do exist. She wasn't exaggerating. I've been stopped by them myself periodically. It's not frequent, but it does happen. But I am sort of curious how something like this comes into town. There's certainly a lot of impacts in terms of safety. There's a lot of impacts in terms of traffic. There's wetlands right there. There's a little stream that flows through that area. I don't see any studies that have been forced in order to be done in terms of some kind of impact studies upon the residents or upon the wetlands. Maybe you can explain to me how this circumvents that entire process. This is not quite like 3 Mile Island here, but it certainly has a lot of potential for being a very disastrous situation. It certainly impacts most people that live within a pretty broad radius. Certainly has a big impact on the Cummings School upon a train station that's right there, which has a fairly large amount of people that travel publicly down there, well within a blast radius. How does this happen without just secretly during the night it suddenly appears and we get notice that, hey, guess what, we're coming in? Have we looked at the potential of stopping it based upon wetland impact, taking over that property that came up for sale? If I'd known it was going to turn into this, I probably would have bought it myself and just frozen it. However, by the way, I saw it for sale. I didn't realize this was what was the intention of what was going on. It just suddenly went off the market. I said, gee, that sold really fast. Has the town looked at taking that under like eminent domain with the wetlands sitting right there? So are there some plans of looking at alternatives other than hoping that federal court will save us from our railroad system?
So this all falls under the concept of preemption, which I will admit, back in October, I didn't know what preemption was. And I was in the same place I think a number of us were, that how could any building be going on without permits, site review, going in front of the planning board or the building department, et cetera? The concept of preemption for a railroad is that if this is a railroad activity that the railroad owns, runs, as part of commerce and the movement of goods, it is preempt from local and state rules and regulations. So we have a local water overlay district there. It would be preempt from that. We have local building codes. We have local zoning codes, yes, because that property is actually zoned residential. It is preempt from all of that. That is the argument the railroad is making. The board and the town is arguing, no, you're not preempt from it, and you need to go through this whole process. If the facility was preempt, in theory, the railroad could build the entire facility and only have to get it inspected before they filled the tanks and began to operate. And that was the approach they were taking. They were doing their own inspections that they hired with people, but no plans were submitted to the town until mid-November, where we were able to begin looking at them, at which point a lot of the site work had been done. I believe some of the concrete settings for the tanks were poured, some of the steel was already constructed. And we've really been, as someone said earlier, you know, the horse has left the barn, and we're really trying to catch up on that as fast as we can. So this wasn't something that we, as a town, were aware of and we're just letting happen. On our March 20th Board of Selectmen meeting, both myself and Mr. Paget asked the owner of the railroad directly what his plans were for that property. He did not respond to the question at the time. I'm guessing he, based on how fast construction is going on there, they probably had a rough idea of what was being planned. So that's kind of the crux of the issue in that we're at here, where there's this concept of preemption where he could just go out and build this, not have to have plan review and so forth until it was already built. If we are able to win or make our argument and the judge decides in our favor in court that preemption doesn't hold, then now he is, or the railroad is required to meet zoning rules, follow all of our town bylaws, the water overlay district and all of that. If it is determined to be preempt, in essence, all of our local ordinances are tossed out the window. The one area that I believe are federal EPA regulations, they are not preempt from those. And we are in contact with the EPA. So I think that answered most of your questions. Do you have a second part?
I think you did too. Thank you very
Okay.
much. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Pull this down a little. My name is Sandy Daly. I live on Waterville Street. My concern is the proximity of the elementary school to those tanks. And my question is, aren't there some kind of regulations, either statewide or federal, preventing something that explosive and that potentially dangerous from being that close to an elementary school? That's it.
Not that we could find. The only thing we could find is there's a Department of Homeland Security has a requirement for a facility of this size to be registered and reviewed through that federal agency. So we've contacted them and awaiting their response.
You still haven't heard from them?
No, we sent it on December 20th. So I'm considering with the holidays, we'll probably call them next week, early next week, to see if they received it, if they have an answer.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. Catherine Ryan, 4 Waterville Circle, North Grafton. My first question is, because I know that the town administrator said he was working on the claim that to file with the Federal Surface Transportation Board. I'm sorry. Has the Board of Selectmen, is that too loud? Filed a claim with the Surface Transportation Board?
No.
Do you intend to file a claim with the Surface Transportation Board?
When we had the case removed to federal court, we asked the judge what his druther was, whether he would want to hear it himself or send it to the STB. He chose to hear the case on its merits.
Okay.
So I can only stay on one track, if you will.
Okay. Are you familiar with the case of the Grafton Upton Railroad against the town of Milford,
Yes,
which Milford won?
correct.
They submitted a claim to the Surface Transportation Board, and because it was with the Surface Transportation Board, the federal court didn't rule until the Surface Transportation made their ruling. And when they did make their ruling, the federal court upheld the Surface Transportation Board ruling that preemption did not apply to the activities that he was doing off the railroad.
That is correct.
That's correct, yeah. So again, I really think it's important that if you haven't filed with the Surface Transportation Board, that that's something that we really need to consider doing, because there's so many things wrong with this project on so many levels in terms of what some of the other people have said, not just the safety, the North Grafton Elementary School, the Watershed Overlay District, the conservation, the DPE, I go on and on and on, hazardous materials, possible explosions that would wipe out that entire part of the town and potentially the school. I mean, there's just so many things wrong with this on so many levels.
No, we agree. As Mr. McInerney said, we asked the judge hearing the case if he would prefer that we go to the STB, but he said he would rather hear the case. The problem we have is, as everybody knows, we're a small town. And for us to be able to work on such an abbreviated timeline for a trial that begins in 11 days and at the same time work on the STB application, we only have limited resources. So I wish we could be doing both at the same time, but it's...
Yeah, well, and I understand about limited resources, but let's face it, we're a day late and a dollar short. I mean, some of this should have been done a long time ago. I mean, for him to have gotten to the point that he's gotten with nobody asking any questions whatsoever is, as I said before in another meeting, is just mind-boggling to me. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, he could tell us anything, and do we believe anything he says? I mean, I'm just really greatly concerned about all of that aspect. So I really hope that, and maybe here's another question, I mean, pending the ruling on January 14th, is the town prepared to go forward if the ruling isn't totally in our favor?
Yeah, I guess in an appeal in federal court, or just go
Sure.
right to the STB?
Taking it to the Surface Transportation Board.
I think...
I'm just going to interrupt you. First of all, the reason why we went to the federal court as opposed to STB doesn't have staying power. We were worried about these tanks being moved into Grafton, so we wanted the restraining order in effect.
Understood.
STB could not restrain them from moving those tanks.
Understood on that.
So we went to the federal court because it was the most expeditious way
Yeah.
possible to keep those tanks
Yeah.
out.
But this does go a lot more beyond just delivering tanks.
It does, but just like in Milford, when that case was appealed to the federal court, if we won or lost at STB, it could be appealed to federal court. So like I said in the opening statement, we wanted to start where we would end anyways, and that's right at federal court.
Okay.
And they had the authority to stop it. And we can't file in both. We wouldn't go back to file it to them because the federal court had already made a ruling on it. It's already, a Shepardized case, there's nothing you can do with it.
Are you sure?
Yes?
I thought for sure that they went back to the
If you start at
STB
STB
after
and
the...
you win or lose, either party can go to the federal court. We're at the federal court now, and they have more authority over this matter than STB.
No, I understand that. But like I said, they went to the STB and they
I understand what they
upheld
did.
their ruling.
They may not have had an urgent issue like we had with those tanks being moved into town. We felt if they got moved, there were so many problems with the route That gave us great consternation. We just moved on the cease and desist. The only way to get that upheld was to go to the federal district court.
Okay, well, what are our options if we're not ruled in favor? Can we appeal?
We could.
Okay. Do you think you might consider that?
We don't think we're going to lose.
I like that attitude, Brooke. I hope you're right. I hope you don't lose. We're counting on that, our entire town, because quite frankly, what's to stop this man if he just railroads us, no pun intended, in this part of town? That railroad runs through the entire town. What's to stop him from claiming preemption all throughout the town and start tearing this town apart and building whatever he wants to build? That's a grave concern, and it goes far beyond just North Grafton, far beyond. So that's all I have to say tonight. But Brooke, did you want to say something, Brooke?
Not really. I was going to echo, it's a complicated issue.
I know.
For the town, in some ways, it's very simple, and Dave said it already. It's about preemption. If we win on preemption, we're going to follow all our rules. It's not zoned properly, and it will probably not get built. If he wins on preemption, we have very few hooks to go back after him, right? Because all our zoning gets, all the local laws get preempted. So it's simple in some ways. But it's a complicated issue. So I know everyone has concerns, and we have the same concerns. The fact that it's near a school, a Bio 3
Correct.
lab, near these houses,
Correct.
all the water lay, all of that is very important. Unfortunately, if he's found preempt, we can't do anything about that. So when we decided to do a cease and desist, we don't want to waste town money. And frankly, if he comes up with some great argument and proves that he does have preemption,
Yeah.
that is going to be very irritating, because we've spent a lot of money now going to court, where if he had proven his case prior to that, we wouldn't have spent the money. If we thought he had preemption,
Right.
we would have said, okay, you have preemption. Now let's see how we can make it safe. Let's see how we can buffer it. Let's see how we can make all the people around that neighborhood happy. He didn't prove preemption, so we're going to spend the
Correct.
money. I wish he
Correct.
could have proven it or not proven it, straight out, but it's a gray kind of area, and we wouldn't be taking the case, we wouldn't be going forward if we thought he had preemption, because that's going to be a waste of money. So we assume we are going to win. If we lose, because it is a case, it is gray, we'll have to look at it at that time to see if we have a case to go on appeal. If we don't, I don't want to throw money after it. We want to, again, go back to him and say, all right, let's put up some trees, let's make it safe, let's do what we have to do. But this board felt, based on what was presented by Grafton Upton Railroad, he didn't make a case. You can't just say, I can because I can.
That's right.
Which is what he's been doing.
Right.
And I know this doesn't sound the right way, but there's activity that Grafton Upton Railroad has been doing things up and down that, and he can do that, because he is preempted of moving anything on
the
those
railroad,
rails.
yes.
Up until November, we had no idea what he was doing. So I think we've moved about as quickly as you can go, from November to having a stay in federal court, now having a trial on the 14th. We moved pretty quickly once we were made aware. We had some indication he was doing something, but until he gives you a plan, he can do what he wants on his railroad, right? He can move dirt around. He's not breaking any laws. Once he started building things and gave us a plan, that's when we took action. And it wasn't until November. And I think since November, we've moved about as quickly as you can go.
No, I understand that, and we all appreciate that, and we hope you win. Thank you.
Matthew Flynn, 67 Waterville Street. Prior to us having knowledge of a propane facility being built, I am going to have to disagree with you, Brooke, that he was doing things wrong on the property in regards to our Chapter 7 Grafton Overlay Water District Charter. These laws are a home rule charter provision by the Attorney General of our state, which are written with all of the knowledge that we have over the Federal Clean Water Act and 401, 404 Clean Water Acts. I know that even though we didn't know what he was doing with the property, but moving dirt on that farmland is in violation of law. I have done extensive research on this matter, as far as to prepare a 2-page document submitted to you guys on December 26, where I asked each of you to sign this document and return it back to me so I knew that you read this document. I'd like to ask you now if any of you signed those documents.
No.
This is now going back to a problem that others in our town have made forthcoming of the problem of communication between our citizens and all of you members up there. How is it that I can prepare a 2-page statement, take 2 days off of work, which I am happy to do for the town that I love, self-employed, to try to find out what's going on with the protection of the Grafton Waterway Overlay District, and you guys don't have the decency to return a signed letter to me? I simply asked for you to read it and sign it so I know that you accepted that and that you read it. My question is, why didn't you do that?
Dad, I read your letter, and it did say, would you sign it? Nowhere on there did it say why I was signing it. I don't know if you meant I was signing it because I agreed with you, disagreed with you, or any reason why. Why didn't you contact me? Why didn't you contact me?
I am going to ask the town administrator to read and sign this document with the date stamp of December 27, 2012. I'm also asking for a signed copy from each of our selectmen. Why do you need to know, why do you think it was that I wanted you guys to sign that? Have we made it very clear that there's a communication breakdown amongst us in this board? Have we not made that clear? How do I know that you guys got this? Now, for everybody who doesn't know what this document is, sigh if you want. This is a very serious matter. This is a matter that supplies half of the drinking water to our residents on that property. I have done the homework. 50% of the water coming from our East Street wells supply the town. This piece of property that everybody thinks he can go and do what he's been doing, even though we don't have a plan, is an aquifer for our town. Our Chapter 7 guidelines says that you cannot remove soil from this ground, because that is what filters our drinking water. He's created more runoff. Runoff is bad because it picks up whatever contaminants are on the top of the earth and runs it right into open streams and waters. Now it's not going through our aquifer. So my question is, prior to the knowledge of the propane, time and time again it was brought to your attention that they were doing construction in this area. Why did you feel as though you could not or should not spend money to see if he could do what he was doing? And if you did, can you please tell me that you did spend money to see if he could do the excavation work that was happening in the overlay district?
The only response, I mean, you made a lot of statements there, but Conservation went down there several times to look at what
This
he was
isn't
doing.
conservation, though, Brooke. This is the Water District overlay, which Linda Detloff made it very clear to me that she doesn't have jurisdiction over the overlay district. That was all in here.
Okay, so you just...
So on December 19th, I was the first person to tell Phil Nadeau at the DEP that this was a Grafton overlay district, watershed overlay district. Why is it that it takes a citizen in the town to notify the DEP on December 19th that I was the first person to notify them that this was an overlay district?
No disrespect, I'm not sure where this goes, but when we had the meeting on December 4th, Lee Adams was at the meeting from
Yeah.
DEP, the regional director. She knew at that point, we've had subsequent conversations with her relative to the water protection overlay. Not that they have authority over it anyways, but the erosion control that they were ordered to do is obviously being done. We may disagree with how or what materials they're spreading there, but they know about it. They
The
do.
erosion control, my question is, erosion control should not be an issue if that land was not mined of its material like it has been. So my question is, why is it, I guess where we're seeing differently is you're telling me Lee Dillard knew, where Lee Dillard deferred this to Phil Nadeau, and he did not know. So how is it that it gets lost in translation that everybody's upset about the propane, I'm upset about the propane, but we have a bigger problem here with what's going to happen with that property with any future plans, but in my opinion, there's already been problems with the property of it mined of its natural ability to filter water. He's talking about having a repair facility for engines and cars, and Chapter 7, our rules that were written into the law books, says none of that can happen in that overlay district. I guess one of my questions is the preemption ruling. Is the preemption ruling also a ruling on the fact that he can do the destruction of the aquifer and the land on the property that he's done?
The preemption ruling will be in regards to the propane business.
Okay. So, has the town put any thought into going for preemption on the fact that it's an overlay district for half the town?
It's a piece of the argument. It's just a piece of the argument.
Piece of what argument?
For why we think he's not preempt, and why, you're presupposing that if he was not preempt, that these would apply, and you'd be right. But if he is, they do not. And it's an unfortunate truth, and we don't like it, and we want to protect it as much as we can, but there's, short of a federal judge telling him he cannot do it.
So let me get this straight. You're saying that you have full knowledge that a a town-protected water overlay district is a piece of the puzzle that can fall under preemption with the railroad?
It's a piece of our argument against the railroad. There's many pieces.
All right, so I guess my question again is the fact that he has done the construction and the moving of dirt on the property part of the preemption ruling that we are going for on January 14th? Is that part of the argument that we're using to make sure that, in other words, is propane the only entity here that we're trying to get preemption ruling on?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
If it's ruled in our favor, the trial that's upcoming, he still owns that piece of property, the 42 Westboro, the former HU property. He could, under preemption, put in 8 tracks of siding in that land he's leveled and park railroad cars there.
Okay.
And it's in a water overlay district, and it's all preempted. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it. That is our understanding, because it is a local overlay district. It's not a federal EPA zone or mandate.
So I guess that's my question then. Has the town spent money to see if a town overlay district falls under federal clean water drinking ruling? Rules of the Federal Clean Water Drinking Act.
I don't believe we've specifically researched that.
So I guess, how can we say that we don't believe that?
If it did, EPA would have jurisdiction, and then they could look into it. But the town will not have jurisdiction. If what you're saying is the overlay is under the Federal Water Protection Act, then the EPA would then have jurisdiction to look at what's going on there. But we would not have jurisdiction.
So is the EPA being brought in on this preemption matter for the water?
Preemption is a totally different thing. If he has preemption, the preemption has to do, as Dave said earlier, with activities of the railroad. Not whether it's in the water, not whether it's near a school, not whether it's near Bio 3, not whether it's around a residential area. Does it have to do with the activities of the railroad? That's the preemption issue. If they have preemption, we don't have local authority. If they don't have preemption, we do have local authority, and then we can do all the things you're talking about. But it's not, not that all these things are a big package, but it's not really a part of the argument for or not preemption, the fact that it's near the water. I mean, it's part of the argument, but it's not really germane to the preemption issue, which is all going to be about the railroad.
Okay, one last question. If he's allowed to move these tanks through town, it's been, the town administrator and myself had a conversation about the bridges that my family and a lot of the town's children drive over in school buses. Where are we on engineering on our bridges? So if on the 14th he's ruled that these tanks can be moved, which are on dollies, excuse me, not trailers, waiting to be moved into our town, the town administrator, and stop me if I'm wrong, said that you would not like to spend any of the town's money to prove that our bridges will hold that weight.
That's correct.
Are we ready for the aftermath of a 225,000-pound tank going over a bridge that's not rated for it, that could structurally crack a member and have it pose a problem in a year or two when a school bus falls into this bridge? Should we perhaps make it that the person who would like to move these overweight materials over our bridges pay for engineering on our bridges? Maybe that's a possibility. Or, I understand we don't have a lot of money, but what do you think it's going to cost to build a bridge under emergency situation, or if 30 or 40 children get hurt in a bus that has to go over this bridge now that's been manipulated by this load?
Well, any bridges that are on state roads, 122, 40, 140, Route 30, that's Mass DOT, and it's their job to inspect those bridges. As far as the ones that are ours, we sent a memo from the town to the railroad informing them that our last inspection, structural, I don't know, maybe Tim has the right phrasing, is about 10 years old, and they are to traverse those at their own risk. And we've made them aware of the fact that they will be the ones traveling those, and if they create damage, then it's on them.
Are you under the understanding that the damage will show instantaneously? Are you guys not afraid of damage being done, not collapsing, and collapsing in the near future after these tanks have been moved?
I mean, that's the scenario. I respect your opinion on that, but in theory, you could argue damage is going to be done and the bridge will collapse in 22 years from now because of a crack that was created. So If I can ask, Brian, can you just explain what the memo was that we sent to the railroad?
Yes, I sent a memo to the railroad in regards to the fact that the bridges and culverts along the proposed routes that changed several times.
Brian, could you just introduce yourself so people know?
Speak into the microphone.
Yeah.
Brian Cesarco, engineer for the town. Sent a memo to Mr. Deli Perscoli in regards to the condition of the bridges with the last, they were last inspected 12 years ago. And basically, take it back just a quick second, the state automatically goes out and inspects all spans of 20 feet or more. So anything that's less than 20 feet is town-owned, and it's town-owned. We have to conduct the inspections. So, like I said, and the last time we did it was 12 years ago. The route changed several times from what was proposed for bringing in a load. And we didn't have bridge plans on most of them. And like I said, the inspections are a little old and none of them really had ratings on them. Now, in regards to the load traveling over any sort of a span, or the road for that matter, the trailers that these tanks would be coming across on would probably be, multi-axle, 4 wheels each axle. And what happens is you spread that pressure out, so it all comes down to pounds per square inch, where the load, as heavy as it might be, when you have that amount of tire on the ground surface, you're reducing the pounds per square inch based on how much of it's in contact with the ground. Same thing like a high heel. A woman wearing a high heel that steps on wet ground, the heel goes in, but if you stand on it with regular shoes, you're going to be fine on it. So that's the idea behind it. It's not so much the overall weight of the tank or whatever's being transported itself, it's how it's spread out and how fast it's moving as well. I have received nothing.
But just to address Mr. Flynn a minute, we've sent a letter to DOT as well as Mr. Della Piscoli saying we have serious concerns about the bridges and him traversing these bridges. Other than that, right now, he can't do it. He's under a cease and desist order. And then we'll go to trial.
Until after the trial.
And then we'll see what happens after that. But we've addressed it to DOT, we've addressed it to Mr. Della Piscoli. As they've said, we're not going to go out and test all these bridges because he may bring something across them. We got to wait, not to cross the bridge. We got to wait till, see what happens at the trial. At which point DOT has been notified we have serious concerns. He has been notified we have serious concerns. If we happen to lose that and he has to move those, well then we have serious concerns.
Cornelius Flynn, 5 Cedar Hill Road. I'm actually Matt's brother. I think the point Matt was making and the question he was asking was, and I'll ask one question then another. The case that's being heard in federal court has to do with the propane issue and whether or not that particular piece of business is in fact exempt. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if we win that, and we're all hopeful that we do, I think what Matt is asking is other activities that Grafton Upton would hope to perform on that site, even those that have already occurred, what is being done or what can be done to protect the aquifer, independent of the exemption case that's being heard in federal court relating to the movement of propane on the site? That's my question.
We would go to the EPA and ask for their assistance. That's what we would do. Yeah, I mean, do we think the water is contaminated?
So can we go to the EPA now?
They've been noticed on all of the materials that we've talked about. I haven't made direct contact with them yet. They're not a very responsive, friendly agency, but we're gonna get to that point where they're gonna have to support us and give us some.
Well, I would suggest we're at that point already, right? We've already damaged the aquifer.
Well, that's a,
consistent with the laws that my brother cited. Yeah.
I don't know if it's been damaged. You're saying it's damaged. I don't know if it's
Well-
damaged.
Well,
I understand, but again, if he's doing activity that is preempt, then it overrides all of that.
yeah, but
And
I don't want to, I don't want to talk about preemption, though. I want to talk about protecting the aquifer, right?
no, I understand what you're.
And it sounds like preemption needs to be heard on the merits of each individual activity he wants to perform on that site, right?
Yes.
But in the meantime, he's already disrupted the aquifer, consistent with our own laws on what he can and can't do there. He could continue to do that as these cases roll forward on the various activities he wants to perform on that site. My brother's concern, my concern, and perhaps others is, how do we prevent that while this exemption case, or cases, rolls out through these courts over the next half a century?
Yes, so we have to get the EPA involved.
Okay, so can we do that? That's my question.
We can work towards that, yes.
Beth Stinson, 42 North Main Street. I've had the pleasure of growing up in this town. I have the pleasure of growing up in this town. It's Beth Stinson, 42 North Main Street, and I welcome everybody who are newcomers and hope you'll have a good time, a good life here as well. Thanks to the Flynn family also for doing so much research. I have 2 points that I am concerned about. The first one is, I understand that you're guarding our tax dollars, and I do appreciate that, but I don't want to hear a year down the road, well, we couldn't do that research because we didn't have the money for the extra resources. So if we're facing a very unusual and very important issue for the town, if you need resources, money for the resources, get the money for the resources. I don't know who your legal advisors are. I know we have town council. I don't know if we need additional legal advisors. That's up to your judgment. But the second point that is extremely important to me, and it has been raised by Mr. Flynn and by others, we do have a communication problem. There's not, and what I'm saying is, and I've been concerned about this for a while, there's not an easy way to pick up on information if we miss a meeting, or I know that you've made a commitment to get back to us on the questions we've asked tonight, but I don't know where we get that information. I've been on the town website. I've seen very little about the last meeting when the Grafton and Upton Railroad was there, except for minutes of December 4th or thereabouts. I was looking for something that would be like an issue update page in the town website, understanding that you have to be very careful because you're in litigation, and I've been in business for quite a while, and I know what that's like and how you have to protect your communications. But you do have an obligation to somehow use some creative ideas and basic ideas to just put something out there that if we want an update on what's going on in the propane issue, or for instance, if we want to just see the steps you've taken, which you've summed up very well tonight, I can't find it there. If it's there, I'm missing it. And I think it's time for a new creative way, quickly, to get concise updates for us, dates of meetings. There were 2 versions of minutes I was looking for that aren't on the website, the November 20th and an earlier version aren't out there. I don't know what kind of a glitch that is, but please work on the communications. It will go a long way, concise, accurate, that we can look at. And I'm sure someone in town government has the skills to add that kind of a page on basic town issues, just like we did when they were building the high school. Thank you.
One of the things that I've been hearing you say that your resources are limited. My question is, are you involving our Congressman, George Peterson, and our Lieutenant Governor, Tim Murray? Because they're real close to home. And if anybody has some other creative resources or ideas to involve higher levels of government, even all the way up to the White House, as far as I'm concerned, Are you making those efforts? I am happy to donate my time and volunteer to follow up with the Department of Transportation. Sending memos is great unless you get a person on that phone who hears what you have to say, who understands the importance, because I'm sure every town in this state has their own crises. Waiting for someone to see a memo and get back to you frequently gets lost in the shovel. So I am sure that the citizens of this town are happy to help, instead of just pointing fingers and complaining, because I know some of it sounds like that. I am happy to donate my time every week to help you tackle this issue.
My name is Bob Lewis. I have 2 questions related to preemption. And I understand there's so much that probably can't be discussed because the attorneys are working on their particular case. But I've been getting the impression through the prior meeting and this, that preemption is pretty inclusive, maybe all-inclusive, and I hope it's not. I mean, I understand the concept of preemption, and I understand why it was put in the first place, and why railroads had to have some capability of conducting their business. But I think there must be some place where that meets a buffer. I would think.
I would like to read, excuse me, Sean Flynn, 65 and a half Waterville Street. I'd like to read something straight out of an STB decision, okay? Now, they are referring to the Interstate Commerce Act that has entitled these railroads to all these preemptions, and at the end of the day, they do not have, the preemption issue does not come into play when it comes to drinking water. And I'll read you something that is straight out of their decision. Finally, in section 10501B, it is intended to, nothing in section 10501B is intended to interfere with the role of state and local agencies in implementing federal environmental statutes such as the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Safe Drinking Water Act. See Stampede Pass 2.1.C, yada, yada, yada. Okay? Now you go to the Safe Drinking Water Act. The very third section of this act, section 1413, under state primary enforcement responsibility, the very first sentence, for purpose of this title, a state has primary enforcement responsibility for public water systems. And then it goes on to enumerate all of the authority that the state does have. The DEP should have been involved in this from day one, when they first started moving dirt around, and certainly now when the entire hydrology of that whole area has been changed. Okay? And any future work that he's going to do, he's going to continue to alter this. But he cannot affect our public drinking water under this, blanket of preemption. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. That does speak specifically to one part of what I was getting at. And it goes, my concern goes beyond the drinking water, but includes it. Because if preemption, if Mr. Della Friscoli bought the property, the former HU property, for the purpose of being able to use it for his railroad, and if it is a pre-exempt purpose, which I would have some question about, and I'm sure the lawyers will discuss that in court. But this behavior and this intended use goes beyond the confines of that property. So the preemption that would exist for the property would not exist for the surrounding property, which would be all these people's homes. So we can all agree to certain amounts of preemption that yes, he doesn't have to put up with the zoning if it's zoned for residential, but he's got to conduct his railroad business. I think that was the intention of preemption in the first place. But if he's going to do damage to others off-site, or potential damage to others off-site, that's where I start to wonder, does preemption just continue for whatever he chooses to do? Because as I've done with kids I've taught in classes in the past, when they have some question about where something is real or not, you just keep on bringing it. Where does the line get drawn? So if he decides that because if he's preempt for everything that relates to the railroad, if he decides he's going to just dump all the oil that comes off a railroad train into that property and he's preempt, someone's going to have something to say about it, I hope. Whether he's preempt or whether he thinks he's preempt or not. And this is a case where he's got something going on here that will quite dramatically have the potential for that type of damage, way beyond the scope of what he intends to do by moving railroad cars.
If I can just briefly do a little more on preemption. So preemption, whatever the activity is being done, must be being done by the railroad. They can't be done by another company. And it has to be related to the rail activity or the movement of goods. So the example that was brought up earlier by Ms. Ryan was the Grafton Upton Railroad case in Milford. And Mr. Dello Pascoli did not own the railroad at that time, it was a different owner. But in Milford, what was happening was, it was a piece of property located adjacent to the railroad, and it was railroad property, it was right there, but they were doing metal fabrication. The fabrication of metal is not part of rail activity, and that's why Milford won their case. So that's where it comes down to, it's just that he can't do anything he wants, it has to be related to rail activity, or the movement of goods, the transfer of goods. That's where a loading dock is preempt if it's just transferring goods from rail to truck. And it has to be owned by him. So he can't build a Walmart and claim, hey, I'm just commerce is going on here. So, I mean, those are kind of the two main pillars of preemption. And, you know, not to get into specifics because we can't, but the town has issues with what the railroad feels in regards to this facility and how it meets those metrics.
Richard Cedar again. I have great concern about the dangers of propane as well as the importance of the safety of our water supply. As far as the propane goes, you don't have to go to Canada or Toronto to read about terrible explosion. City of Springfield, down the road from us, lost a neighborhood and several people a few months ago. I think we all read about that because of gas explosion. And there have been many others in the country. So that's the comment. My other question has to do with the Grafton Upton Railroad. We live on Countryside Road, as I said before, near where the railroad crosses Carroll Road. If you know that crossing, there is simply a stop sign and a sign says there's a railroad here. There's no gate, there's no way. It should flash lights when the cars are coming. My question is that going to continue to be the case if they succeed in running 80,000-gallon tanks of propane up and down that road?
So in regards to that, most of the crossings in town will remain just with signs. There is a plan being put forth to redo the ones at the center of town with gates. As far as propane, what we've been told, it will come in on the CSX line in North Grafton and come off the main line just into the North Grafton facility and stay there. So there will not be train cars filled with propane transferring through town. They'll still be carrying whatever they currently carry into Upton and Milford, but no propane. But 90% of the rail crossings in America are simply just signage. There's no lights or gates.
Could anyone answer why the railroad wants to bring this facility up into Grafton rather than leaving it in Upton or Milford?
I cannot. That'd probably be a question for the railroad as to why they picked Grafton over one of their other sites.
Because it was close to CSX. Because it was close. They picked that site because it was the closest to CSX, who brings the cars in with the propane. I mean, that's what he told us.
Where do they bring it to? To Upton?
No, the propane would come in from CSX line and just right into Grafton Upton's property off of Westboro Street, Westboro Road.
Thank you.
Just to address the crossings a little bit, those crossings are the responsibility of the railroad. They're not the town's responsibility, and we've heard numbers for up to $1 million per crossing. So my guess is it's going to stay the way it is for quite a while.
Excuse me. Bill Richlick, 80 Weston Street, North Grafton. Couple of questions, couple of concerns. Is it the board's position that this preemption includes all additional property that this guy can go out and purchase? That's obviously what he's done here. I think what he's building in this propane is on an adjacent piece of property that he's recently purchased.
That's correct. It's on an adjacent piece of property.
So he could go buy half the town of Grafton and do whatever he wants.
Our
if
understanding is
preemption
it has
holds
to be,
true.
as long as it's adjacent to, he can't just buy a property on Adams Road and claim preemption there. It has to be adjacent to the railroad. So he could buy out from the railroad. That is
But
our
right now,
understanding.
it's the board's decision that preemption doesn't apply here.
Well, it's our decision that we feel it doesn't apply, but we need a ruling from the federal government that it doesn't apply.
Guys, this didn't start yesterday. We have a building department and a zoning officer. Where have they been since all this started?
Well, under the concept of preemption, all of the stuff our building department does is tossed out the window. He doesn't have to follow any of that.
One of the other issues that I wasn't aware of until after the last meeting where Mr. Perscoli informed you guys these tanks were coming in on Thursday and surprised the board. Does the people of the town of Grafton realize these tanks are 50 years old?
Yep, no.
Where did they come from? When I go down to Koopman's and fill my propane tank and it's over 4 years old, they won't touch it. Now, now you're going to put 320,000 gallons of propane in tanks that are 50 years old. We have bridges in the state of Massachusetts, less than 50 years old, the structural steel has failed, and we're rebuilding those bridges. So what kind of guidelines do these tanks fall under, and who's certifying them? If it's Geotech that's certifying the compaction, let me take you all over to a project in Northborough that Geotech certified, and FedEx building fell down. I'll take you all over there and show it to you. Geotech with a soil analysis company that certified compaction. Now you got the footings over there. It's all preempt. No one's inspecting anything.
The state fire marshal will have to inspect the tanks and sign off on them. And we were told by the state fire marshal that they actually prefer the older tanks because they felt that things were built a lot better 50 years ago than they are now.
If I might answer.
But also, don't forget, the town, to respond to you, the town issued a cease and desist for bringing these tanks. And we have taken them to federal court, because we have the same concerns. It's not, we appreciate all the input, but we're with you with all the things that you're saying. We're not just saying, throwing our hands up and saying that's the way it is. We have the same concerns about the tanks. We issued a cease and desist. We have the same concerns about preemption. You know, we issued a cease and desist. We're going to federal court. We're doing the best we can with what we have. I think we need, the more input, the better, but it's not as if we're just unaware of all these things and we're throwing up our hands saying, well, there's nothing we can do. We're taking the steps that are given us as a municipality.
Chair?
John.
If I might answer the question concerning the construction of the vessels, I specifically asked Mr. Del Priscoli what if the vessels were ASME or if they were DOT vessels. Each one of them are built to a different standard. A DOT vessel is built to a DOT standard. It's a book about 2.5, 3 inches thick, and it covers all packaging. And the propane tank that you bring down to Koopman is a DOT vessel. Has thin steel, has to be inspected on a periodic basis, both internally and externally. An ASME vessel is built, as was stated, to a much stringent standard. The steel is much thicker. The inspection, the initial inspection, is far more stringent than it is on the DOT vessels because the inspections after the installation and after the manufacture are not required as often as they are in a DOT vessel. Now, if these have been sitting there, if they're 50 years old, as was stated, and they're going to be installed, I am sure that the fire marshal is going to have those tanks inspected. And now they use ultrasound on the welds. And if he suspects anything, if there's any corrosion, there are methods to determine the depth of the corrosion. And if the tanks are not suitable, the tanks will not be able to be filled. However, I'm going on the assumption that those tanks are never going to leave Fall River because we're going to get the ruling on the preemption. So I guess everything we've been saying here is everything that we are talking about relies upon the decision of a federal judge. And if he rules in our favor, so be it. And I guess we'll have to deal with what comes down the pike after that. And believe me, we will deal with it. We don't take this lightly. I don't take this lightly. I don't say much, but you can believe that I don't take this lightly. Thank you.
Good evening, Philip Grandin, Leland Avenue. I just have a question of clarification. Earlier, you had mentioned that the preemption only qualifies if the Grafton and Upton Railroad itself is doing the work on the property. However, I just wanted to make sure that this was, in fact, the Grafton and Upton Railroad doing work on the North Grafton lot, and not the First Colony Development Corporation, which is another company owned by Mr. Del Priscoli. I want to make sure that he's not trying to play some sort of shell game that makes it look like he's preempted and goodness knows what else he's doing.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify, when I said that Grafton Upton Railroad has to be doing the work, they need to be the owner of the site, have the financial investment and responsibility into it, and be setting the operation and stuff. They can hire a subcontractor to do the work, to move this pile of dirt or to build
They
this.
can or cannot?
They can. They're allowed to do that. What they cannot do is have another company run the site, set the hours, choose what they're going to charge customers, have customers pay another company. Like, everything must be geared towards the railroad. It must be, the railroad has to have skin in the game, per se. Total control.
Well, I just want to make sure that it was, in fact, the railroad in control and not First Colony. When I spoke to Mr. Del Priscoli at the last meeting, he gave me his business card. Does not say Grafton and Upton Railroad. It says First Colony Group on it.
We're well aware of that.
All right, and a second unrelated question. It might sound stupid, but does the town have the power to tax railroad property? No? Thank you.
We don't we're able to tax the personal property aspect. So we would tax the tanks if they were built there. There would be a tax on the tank, like an excise tax type of stuff.
Given the nature of the property, would it be taxed as industrial or residential area?
Based on value.
Based upon value? Yeah. And more to that point of industrial versus residential, I'm not sure exactly how much it has to do with the town, but just so you know, the Grafton Upton Railroad on its website is advertising to clients that this land is entirely industrially zoned and open for development.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name's Alan Cohen. I'm on 1 Vincent Road. A lot of emphasis is being placed on this court case. Having just come out of a court case with 200 others against a Fortune 500 company, found out some very interesting things. Like, one, when you go to hire a law firm, if they have anything to do with the industry or the company that you're suing, they'll say they have a conflict of interest and can't take a case. So in our case, many of the law firms had represented this company, or in this case, many of the law firms might have at times represented railroads. And when you go to them, they're going to tell you they can't take the case because it's a conflict of interest. We spent over, us as individuals, not the defendants, we spent probably 10 to 15 times what we did. We spent over $3 million, spent 6 years. It was a case that was started in the state court, was transferred like yours to the federal court. The law was based on a state court law, but the federal court was hearing it. At the end, the state court, in another case, ruled what would have been in our favor in another case, but the federal court ruled against us. We never did get our day in court because these guys had the money and all to keep it tied up in the shape of the table, color of the paper we're going to use and stuff like that. My question to you guys is, who's representing us? What are their qualifications? Do they have the resources to take on a case like this, or are they on a learning experience dealing with a federal case of this type?
We're being represented, our lead counsel is our local town counsel. Bowman and Pinsky is the law firm. Jeannie Kramer is town counsel, and she's taken the lead on this. And she has been working with other firms, kind of, I guess you may be trying to think back to my Law and Order, sitting second chair and assisting with that. We've told Ginny, whatever she needs, we support it. And if that means bringing on another firm, that's, we're behind that. A lot is being said today. It's very complex. But like I was saying earlier, preemption really boils down to only a couple of points, and our argument is proving that they don't meet those points. So we feel that although we talk about it, it sounds complex and whatnot, the pure legal arguments are not overly complex or challenging that are being made. So we feel that we're in a very good position with our current counsel on this.
Our case was on contract law, and contract law is very prevalent, and everybody supposedly knows about it. Yet the other company had over 1,000-person law firm supporting them, and it became a matter of who had the best lawyers, not who had the best case. Because like I said, in another case, they lost on the same subject because it was in a state court. So that's my concern, is you keep on putting emphasis on it, and we're dealing with a local lawyer who's got 2 weeks to prep a case. We worked 6 years. We had 350 legal boxes of data. So we shouldn't simplify that this is a simple case of just what they're trying to do.
My name is Robert Aberg. I live at 14 Bay Farm Lane here in Grafton. I had a question about zooming out from the propane, because the aquifer is new information to me. is this preemption going to be something we have to challenge each time? Or, if they zoom out one level, what's the landscape of, if there's no preemption, he falls under town rules, and, he goes through procedures for every activity he's going to perform in the future, whether it's propane or moving dirt or some new thing. But if there is preemption, are we going to have to challenge him for every single project from now on to see, is it preemption or not? Or how does that work?
Unfortunately, it's probably the truth. That's probably the case.
Okay, so we're going to have to challenge each thing if there's some
It's going to be
preemption.
specific to the propane. That's our preemption.
Today, yeah,
That's
but
right.
then
So
there's
if
the
tomorrow
aquifer in my
he did
drinking
another
water.
activity and claim preemption, we'd have to see if he was preempted from that activity. As to the EPA information, it gets kind of chicken and eggish, whether who's got authority. I know we've been in touch. It's one of the things we've been talking about here, that we should drill down a little harder on the EPA and have them
Yep.
get out there.
Please.
Because we're just unsure, Again, we got this in November. Things have been rolling fast.
I appreciate all your
We're
efforts,
trying to-
definitely, don't
we're
get
trying
me
to
wrong
cover as
there.
much as possible at some place that maybe we should drill down a little harder on.
Okay, yeah, I was just concerned that we're going to have to, peck at this each time if
Well,
there's some preemption.
if we went on the propane and then he decided to put in something else.
Right.
A grain silo, or I don't
Butane,
know.
I don't know.
Right, it's whether he's preempted on that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Maria Rockwell. I live at Worcester Street in North Grafton. And I just had a few questions with respect to the pending lawsuit. And I've read some articles, and I'm not quite sure what the procedural posture is. You're saying that you're going for trial, and trial will be 6 to 7 days. Is that on preemption as well as the issuance of a permanent injunction after this TRO has been issued, or are there other remedies that the town has asked for within the four corners of the pending lawsuit?
The federal lawsuit will determine preemption, and beyond that, if he's found to be not preempt, then, he could continue to proceed with the site if he came to us and got the permits. We are not seeking any other relief from the courts at this time, but if he's not preempt, then the tanks wouldn't be allowed to come prior to any local approvals, which, as Mr. Ross and others have stated earlier, is unlikely given the zoning climate of that area.
I understand that. So when the town filed the lawsuit in the Superior Court, and then it got removed to District Court further up the street, I'm assuming that the claim wasn't, is it preempted? It was requesting a temporary restraining order to enforce the cease and desist order, correct?
That's correct.
And then, so is the trial, after this trial, assuming that the judge agrees with the town of Grafton and that this activity is not preempt, then is the remedy that the judge will issue, have you asked for a preliminary injunction which would permanently enjoin this railroad from constructing this propane facility?
That would do it on the court. Yeah, that's the intent.
Yes, okay. And then I have just one other question with respect to the preemption. It's my understanding preemption comes from the supremacy the clause of the Constitution. And so we can't pass state or local laws which conflict with federal laws. So even assuming that the district court judge rules that this is the federal law prevails. Yes, thank you, Dennis. It's my understanding that the town of Grafton could still enforce any federal laws which the railroad is conflicted with. Am I not understanding that correctly? Or what research has been done by you folks with respect to, in the worst case scenario, if Grafton is precluded from enforcing its own local laws, Why cannot Grafton enforce federal laws which protect our water supply and other railroad activities and the like?
We certainly would work with, we can't enforce federal laws. We can only enforce our own, but we would work with our partners at the federal government and state government, as we have throughout this entire process, to make sure that, you know, the laws that are on the books and that they can enforce will be enforced against the railroad.
Well, I would respectfully suggest that maybe town council can look at the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision, U.S. v. Arizona, in which the Supreme Court stated that the state had the authority to work in conjunction and enforce federal law. And I think that that's something that this town needs to look into if we do not prevail at this injunction hearing and preemption hearing.
Thank you. Yep.
Just as a note on that, Dennis Flynn, 102 Upton Street, Grafton. You met 3 of my 4 boys. Brendan's over there. He's the 4th. I'm responsible for the 4 of them, in case you're wondering. Just, ma'am, the 38 questions that we gave the selectmen some weeks ago, the first question on there was the police powers, which is part of the Constitution, which says, as citizens in the United States, we do have the right to have ourselves policed, and that we have the power to look out for the safety, health, and welfare of our community. And I guess that comes into, I think, the broader question here that I'd like to, rather than put our good selectmen into any more problems here this evening, I want to make a comment, but before I do that, I first want to thank the selectmen for having this meeting this evening. And in part, it was because of a suggestion that I made to them that I thought it was very important that good information drives out bad, and that I had suggested that the format for tonight was more of us to give them questions and not expect answers until my sons got involved and they were looking for answers, of course. And I'm over there trying to say, no, let's not do that to them tonight. But you guys have been very good about trying to find the answers. But I think there's an elephant here in the room that we need to talk about. And I think it's important that it gets out in the open, because we all make mistakes. And a big mistake's been made here, whether we like it or not. 3 of the 4 selectmen, or 3 of the 5 selectmen, were at a meeting with me back in 2007 when we had a rather long discussion about this property, the Brimacone Farm. And at that time, I made it a point to talk about the sensitive nature of the property that was there and the fact that it sat on an aquifer and that it was part of our protective zone for our drinking water in town. At the time, Mr. Charles Achu, who was a resident in town, wanted to have the land converted into an industrial zone. It was zoned residential. And it not only was overwhelmingly defeated by the town, but the spirit of the town was we need to preserve that property because it is our life spring of water. And if we know anything about what's happening in the future, they say the most important quality that we're going to have is good water. And I've had people come to my house in Grafton just to drink my water. That's the kind of quality of water that we've had and we've enjoyed my 68 years, and look at me, there's nothing wrong, right? Don't say there is. So I think it's important that we recognize that most of us who've lived in town for any period of time knew long ago that there's something going on that's not right over there in the Brimacone field. I went around and asked people in town about it, my own relatives, my own brother. He said, Dennis, there's nothing you can do. I said, what do you mean there's nothing you can do? It's a railroad. It's a railroad. Well, what do you mean it's a railroad? Well, you can't do anything. They got preemption. They got preemption? They preempted my rights to have a clean glass of water? How did that happen? How could that be? I went to the people in town. I went to Representative Peterson. I went to Senator Moore. They all gave me stuff from Upton and what was happening in Upton. Well, I don't want to know what's going on in Upton. I want to know what's happening out in the field here in Grafton. Where's our drinking water? Well, I think we made a mistake from the get-go. If I went out back and tried to put a spade in the ground to do something in my house, rightfully so, we have had one aggressive group of people in this town who said, "You're not going to do it here, kid." And if you look at the regulations, and we don't have just bylaws, we have home rule bylaws. Do you know what a home rule bylaw is? They had to go to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General had to look at all of those bylaws, and the Attorney General had to acknowledge and approve that those have the force of law. Our bylaws are law. And we have people in this town who are here to oversee those laws and police them. And the first time that anyone came into town and wanted to do something with our water or our town, they should have been told, you got to go through the process. And when someone said, "Well, I got preemption," well, we don't go down to Upton to find out if we got it or not. Upton, last I know, was not the court of final resort. The court, go to court. Now let's talk about financing. I don't know, all I hear tonight is, well, you know, this is costing a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of money to do this. Who did it? What are we doing? And now, and these poor guys found out about something in a meeting that I came to, and I told them because I heard something in the street several months ago as a rumor. And I had gone before that, and my son before that, to the town administrator, and all we heard was, there's nothing. Got preemption, there's nothing we can do. Well, what do you mean there's nothing we can do? So we made a mistake. Now, are we going to continue to make mistakes? If we need money, if we need the best lawyers that we can find, this gentleman here, he makes a good point. You better go in there with someone who's a gunslinger, someone who's going to know how to handle this job. This isn't for the faint of heart, but someone who's learning on the job. The other piece of this is communication. Now, we had some here tonight, and our poor selectmen are up here doing the best they can. We got to help them out. You guys have more questions, I'm sure. You got to get those questions to these folks. They need to know what you're thinking. Because if the preemption comes down a different way, or even if it comes down in our favor, who's going to clean up the mess? Who's going to go down and do a hydrological survey to see the damage? Someone said, are you saying the water's contaminated? I don't know. It probably isn't today, but how about 5 years from now? I saw what happened over there. They went down below Pratt's Pond in places, taking out all the good earth, putting in boulders, huge boulders, leaving the land all exposed. What do we know about the financial backing of this outfit? Do they have the resources to take everything out of there and make the land back the way it was if they don't have preemption? Or are they going to leave it all over there the way it is until we all get tired or die or something and they'll come on again with it? Now, I got a cute little story for you. We were having an in-service for teachers one time, and we brought in this psychiatrist to talk to our teachers about behavior. And the fellow said, you know, there were two women in a grocery store going through the checkout line, and one woman had her little girl in the carriage and all dressed up nice and pretty, and she was doing everything just right. Thank you, Mommy, and can I have that? No, wait till you get home. Oh, okay. And the carriage next to him, woman had this fellow, young boy in there, and he was a terror. He was pulling this and doing that, and not asking for anything. She had all she could do to get through the line. And the woman who with the pretty looked over as if to say, my God, you know, you don't know how to raise your child. And the fact of the matter is we're all different. We have different behaviors. We do things differently. And the psychiatrist was making the point that we're not all the same, and some of us have some kind of bad behaviors. We're kind of bad boys. And if we're bad boys, we can grow up to be bad men. And unless someone tells us not to do things, and you have to learn to behave, and you have to exercise self-control, and if you don't, there are consequences, and we're going to see that you do behave. Well, we have to exercise some controls. We can't let people come in and just do whatever they want to do in our town. We have to police ourselves. And if this one goes by, and this one's allowed, then what's the next one? Are those containers going to stop down in North End? Or are you going to see them going through the center of town? And maybe even being stored up in the center on their way south, down to Milford or somewhere. And the questions asked here tonight, I think, are all legitimate ones, because I think our bigger problem here is we need to exercise some control over and feel like we can know what we're doing, and that we have confidence in the people who are in charge, that they know what they're doing. And these poor men are accurate when they say it was November 13th when I came to a meeting and told them something that they should have known months before. And indeed, part of the administration, part of it knew months before. So we have a mistake that was made. We don't want to cover it up. I think we have to admit we made a mistake. Now we can't put everyone at risk. We're going to have to do whatever we need to do to make it right. And whatever that is, I'm willing to do. I'm willing to put up a building if I need it for kids to have a good education. I'm willing to go with more sewerage if it means we need to sewer a part of town. We've done all these things in the past. This is no different. And if we have to go and raise and appropriate some money to get the best gunslinger around to come in and take care of this discipline problem we got, then we'll have to do that. Because we have to have people behaving. So, as I wrap up, I want to thank you again, gentlemen. And I think we have to do more and better with our communication. But you guys are showing us the way. I apologize if people tried to put you on the spot. That was not the intent for the meeting. I wrote down a lot of the questions that came out of this. I'm going to forward them to you, so you'll have them. And if there are more questions here tonight, I'm sure that people will get up and ask them. But I also would like to, before people leave, thank the selectmen for their time and their efforts here this evening. Thank you.
Charles Bolak, 1 Hawthorne Road, on the scene in Grafton for over 65 years. And this issue is the biggest issue ever had. Never mind building a beautiful high school here, police station, or anything else. When it comes down to people's welfare and other issues on this, there are the legal issues which should be certainly going to be settled in the court of law. But when you do things in this town, like you said, we're here with it, you're going to bury the people in Grafton. I'm chairman of the reception committee for St. Philip's Cemetery. We don't have enough lots, and we don't have the lots in another town. The other thing is, it comes out now that the propane doesn't melt until it's 50 degrees below zero. Well, I'm sure Grafton will give them such a cold shoulder that it will never freeze anyhow. What should we do about it? Our selectmen are doing everything legally, and it might be happy left to the people. And it might sound radical, and I am. People have power. I'm willing to lay down on North Main Street and stop those trains coming, and I bet you I can get 500 or 1,000 of them to really do it with me, and let the bill over. We can take us all to Westboro District Court, or take buses to bring us over and keep the court out all night. But do not tell you bury the people of Grafton. Grafton does not take that kind of an insult. Thank you.
Dave Savage, 72 Ferry Street, South Grafton. So I feel your pain when you talk about looking out your window at a bunch of rocks. I live at the Ferry Street Rock Pit. I'm sorry I have a cold, so I can't really speak too loudly here. So I think one of the broader concepts that was touched on earlier was, we can't do much when they first start digging. Well, I think that's where a big part of our problem in town is. I mean, I'm living right next to a gravel pit because, we let the developer dig and didn't ask questions about what they were digging and why they were digging the way they were digging when the plans clearly didn't call for what they were doing. I think we need to look further at policing the projects in the town and the developments and maybe peeling back the layers a little bit faster when the first shovel does hit the dirt. The question that was asked earlier, though, which I don't know that it was necessarily addressed, I mean, the Railroad Act is what provides the preemption component. Where's our congressional delegation as far as supporting us in doing anything down in Washington in trying to further clarify, revoke, repeal, amend? I mean, they do stuff on a dime, or they can sit on it for decades, but where are they as far as helping us out? I mean, clearly that would be the next potential piece of activity that we would want, because the railroad's going to run from North Grafton over to Upton, and it's going to stay there forever. So there's many other opportunities for this railroad to buy more land. What can we do, or what can they do to help us out as far as getting that clarity that we apparently need? And where are they?
We have reached out to the congressional delegation. Other than support staff locally in the Boston offices, they've given us those names of contacts for their staff. So I don't think there's much of an appetite to change the federal law on this matter. They might, depending on how this court case works out. So we've contacted them, but I don't know how to put it any other way, but they're not helpful.
One thing in general to touch on that. Part of the reason we're having this meeting tonight is a handful of residents stood up and spoke, and we heard that, and we're having this meeting and we're discussing it. I can go normally 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and not hear any complaints from residents. So when 3, 4, 5 talk to me, all of a sudden that's a big issue. And it's probably the same way, at least with Representative Peterson and Senator Moore. If everybody in this room contacted their office, they would be overwhelmed. This would become the #1 issue for them, because I doubt there's many issues that more than a dozen people contact them on. So although we're doing our best, we're keeping Senator Kerry and Senator Warren involved, we're letting Representative McGovern know as much as we can through their staffs, they're hearing from the town of Grafton. I think if the residents all started calling or sending letters or emails, I'm sure they categorize stuff by issues, and all of a sudden it's going to be, wow, this is a big issue. I've heard from dozens of people. So I think there's a lot of power there if you guys can help. And, you know, people were saying they want to help and they volunteer. A lot of those people, a lot of our senators and representatives have websites. You can just go on and, you know, fill in a form in 2-3 sentences over 2 minutes and let them know. You know, we don't necessarily have to be making the phone calls or handwritten letters. Send a bunch of emails. Let them know that this is a concern. I mean, that would be one thing that would help us get higher on their radar and maybe get some additional support.
My name is Maureen Turcott. I live on Waterville Street. My concern is, as I drive by that site twice a day myself, going back and forth to work, and I've noticed in the last couple of days that they all of a sudden put up screening so that you cannot see that job site anymore. And I'm wondering if anyone is take notice of that, and if they are going to keep their eye on what he's doing behind that screening.
Part of the restraining order and the court and the judge, when we were before them last week, when he set the hearing for the 14th, the restraining order was to stay in effect, and no work except for the laying of rail can be done on that particular parcel. We go twice a day. We enter it into a log. We take pictures. We know what's going on. We contacted his attorney relative to the activity to let him know that you have a federal court judge that said don't do anything, and yet you continue to do it. We're deciding now, do we take a day off from prepping for the case to go to court to tell him that he's not adhering to the federal, or do we just continue on so let the judge know once we get in front of him? Okay. So we're hedging on, you know, how we do that, but we're starting with the attorney and we did that. We've been doing that ever since the initial hearing was set.
Okay, like I say, it just kind of
Yep, no, we know
blew my
about it. We
mind
know
when
about
I also went by and they have it all
Yep.
blocked off so you can't see. So thank you very much for doing that.
Ruth Holden, Old Westboro Road. I was posed a question. We're agricultural property, and they said to me, gee, what if you bought one of your neighbors and you decided to build a garment factory? Are you still going to be agricultural? So if I had an assessor in here, we'd probably all have that answer. So I'm saying, is them buying this other piece of property, just like we could do in agricultural, putting propane facility, the railroad does not run on propane. Yes, they can carry it, but it seems to me like it's a side business. Just like if I did a garment factory, gee, I could take those T-shirts up and sell them in my vegetable stand, and I could say, oh, that's part of agriculture. You could be stretching it. So, and I hope that you've all thought this area, and you probably have, but I just needed to share it with you, okay?
I didn't think I was going to talk tonight, but I have to. My name is Suzanne Fleming, and I live on Fay Mountain Road, which is about as far from this as you can get and still be in Grafton. But it affects me, because this is my town, and it's being damaged. And I think we need to get the rest of the people, if you live in Grafton, you are affected here. Because this is an elephant, like Mr. Flynn said, but this elephant is willing to step on anybody. And it can hurt any one of us. And we've been woke up, we better stay awake. And I heard some very intelligent people talking here. We may need to pull in our own people. You know, those fancy lawyers, forget it. Get somebody with some common sense that knows the law and knows how to knock on a door. You don't care if it's the White House door, to say, listen, we're in trouble, we need you, and we're United States citizens. And we need your help. If we need to knock on our senators' doors, we need to get their help. We can't expect the selectmen to do it all. As my husband teased me, they get such a high pay, why can't they do it? And that was a good laugh. Because we're a small town, we're mostly volunteers. And that means we're going to have to recruit people from our town to help us when we can't afford any other way. And then when we need the money, we'll get it one way or another, just like we did for our schools, for everything else that has to be done. But we need to do this as a town.
I think that was a good note to end the evening on. Last chance. Oh.
Steve Remillard, Messier Street. Did you say earlier that you got a set of plans from him once this all came to light?
We got, I don't know if you call them full plans, the boards that were handed out at, or shown on the December 4th meeting were the same ones we saw. I think we have one set up in the back.
No, that was not ours.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
not
know.
ours? Oh, okay. Never-
But we did, sometime in late October, the fire chief, along with the state fire marshal, had a filing of a FSA, a fire safety analysis. And that was the only document. Once Mr. Flynn made us aware that this was coming, inadvertently, a selectman had a conversation with the fire chief. He said, yeah, we got a document a couple weeks back. And he was waiting on the fire marshal to give him direction on the next step. So that's how we learned that we even had it in our midst. That was kind of the mistake, if you will, that we made, is the volunteer fire chief received a document, and he just didn't know he should tell me that he had it. So that's kind of the mistake we made.
If this thing does go through for this guy, I'm just wondering what kind of fire suppressant thing he would have around these tanks and a loading station. I mean, would it be chemical? Would it be fire, water? And if it's chemical, have they got some kind of, containment that's going to be in these plans? I'm just confused how he can start building and no one at the state level or the federal level got to give their blessing with some kind of engineered drawings. And with him inspecting his own construction, that's not a good thing. That's the Fox.
We agree, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. We agree
so
completely.
hopefully the town wins and they can make him tear all that stuff up. But if they don't, I hope the state really makes it difficult for him to start operating. Thank you.
Ethan Robbins, 21 High Street. My concern is one with our representation. With only having a few weeks to prepare for a federal multi-day hearing, it seems like we're behind the ball. And that something like this should cost quite a bit. And do we have any understanding of the costs? And does our representation have experience with railroad preemption? Are there any other cases in the United States with similar, with railroad preemption that have gone our way, that have not gone our way? And then also with the water, if we find we test the water and there's a problem, are they responsible for fixing our water supply? I hit someone's car, it's my job to fix their car. Does the same apply there?
With regards to the legal, John Bowman, Penske and Bowman, the law firm, has extensive federal litigation experience. There's not a lot of federal court cases regarding the railroad. Most railroad attorneys work for railroads. They don't work for municipalities or any other public sector. We'll employ experts that we're doing now. In terms of cost, they are working on what an estimate may be. The town meeting allocates about $100,000 a year for its legal services. We may exceed that, and we'll be back at town meeting to ask for a requisite transfer. But, I can't give you, I don't want her prepared to figure out what it might cost her in time when she could be preparing us for the best case possible. So it's difficult to say. What was the second part of the question? Liability on water. If, win or lose, we're going to do whatever we can to protect and clean up if water is contaminated. Whether it's EPA or other means, we're going to do it, just like we're doing with the federal court case here today.
And are there any cost recovery for the current litigation? that we could go after if we were to win this?
Generally, in a lawsuit, people who bring the suit pay their own, unless it's frivolous, and the same is for the opposing. There have been cases where, railroad cases, the town of Air, Massachusetts, had lost the case. Undisclosed damages were awarded to the railroad. We don't know what they paid or if they paid anything. But the good thing about even though they lost in the town of Air, there were 7 points that the court made the railroad do to protect their water, because it was a water issue there as well. So, there's A position, they're not preempt, they can't do it. There's B, that if they are preempt, they have to make it as safe as possible. They got to protect the water. They got to put in whatever separators or wells or whatever they might be, and provide testing and certified plans and all that kind of stuff. And then the next one is as safe as it can be, whether it's leak detection, odorant detection, all that stuff, the water cannons we talked about. I don't know what the suppressant system's going to be, if it's going to be a chemical or a water. I don't know what the best is, but I know I have a state fire marshal that's capable of telling us what it should be.
All right, thank you.
I'll be brief. Wanda Hendricks, 22nd Street. I am extremely nervous about how this got propelled up to the federal court level so quickly. Does anyone have any insight into how that happened that you can speak about? Because I'm amazed. Things usually take, months, years.
Yeah, we are surprised that we have a trial date this quickly as well. We filed in State Superior Court on the 12th, and showed up for court on the 13th at the State Superior Court to have a hearing at 2 p.m. the following day. The railroad filed a motion to have it removed to federal court, citing a federal question or stating that a federal law was at hand and not a state law, and that removal motion was granted. And we had a preliminary hearing that day, and beyond that, the judge met with us again for a hearing on the 21st, and probably an hour or so into it, he decided to set a trial date.
So the railroad initiated bumping it up right away to the feds. Who's the judge that's hearing this?
Timothy Hillman.
Excuse me?
Judge Timothy Hillman.
Timothy Hillman?
Yes.
And my other question is, what time is the hearing, and where is the federal district court? Because I think it would be good, at least if as many people as possible were sitting in court.
Right now, it's scheduled for 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock on the
January 14th. I don't know the specific address. It's on Main Street in Worcester.
It's not it couldn't possibly be co-located with the new state court,
No, it's
right?
on the other side of City Hall from there.
Across from Hanover, isn't it?
Yes, across from the
Oh, the
Hanover
federal
Theater.
court's up by Hanover, 9 o'clock, okay. Thank you.
It's in the intersection.
Thank you very much.
And it's not just the 14th. We're currently scheduled for the entire week. So it's probably like a 9 to 1 every day, in case people want to go multiple times.
Last question, gentlemen. I'm trying not to bring law and order drama into this, but because of the speed that it's made it to the federal level, has anyone literally looked into this particular judge's history to make sure that he should not excuse himself from hearing the case because of any possible connections with the railroad? Because I agree with that lady that it's unusual for things to go this fast up, that usually takes years. So I just want to be sure that everyone's done their due diligence. I'm certainly going to be looking up this judge when I get home to make sure that there are no connections to the railroad whatsoever in any way for this judge.
2 points. One, we're not surprised it ended up in federal court because it's a federal issue. We were kind of expecting that the railroad would file that motion to move it to federal court. So that, I wouldn't say that that's a surprise. And then secondly, the board has asked similar questions. We want to understand who the judge is and also who the other firm is that's representing the railroad, just to know, as the gentleman brought up earlier, the case that he was involved in where they had that, the big money in the massive
Yeah.
firm. So they are being represented by a Worcester firm. I don't know the name of
Okay.
the firm they're being represented. But yes, we've done our research and looked into that.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank everybody for, oh, we have one more question.
Good evening. Good evening. Sean McAvey, 8 Hollywood Drive. A couple of questions or maybe comments, whichever. I know if after the fact we say to them, well, you just polluted this pond or this aquifer, we would need to know prior to this accusation what was the condition, the quality of that water at this time. I know our water department tests the water prior to sending it out to the homes, but it may sound silly, but maybe someone needs to test the pond, so to speak, or take a look at it and get some kind of a decision as to what is the condition of the water in the pond now prior to further or future construction. Is that question, like, again, if we the town, go to them and say, you just ruined our pond, we have to prove that the pond didn't have contaminants or whatever in it prior to their construction. And another question is that, assuming they are allowed to go forward, and as he mentioned earlier, the fire suppression, even if it's a foam, it needs water to be added to it. Does the infrastructure in that area, is the water line big enough to support all the water that the fire department is going to need? You can't just start running pumper trucks to put out that kind of a fire. And I don't want to be the devil's advocate here, but if it's after the fact and we're putting out fires in homes or whatever, consider, assuming the worst, again, is the infrastructure in that area, fire hydrants or water mains or whatever, are they large enough to take care of the needs that the fire department will have, the volume of water, so to speak? If this was a housing development and we were talking about adding many, many houses, we would ask, if it's not well water, then we're going to ask them to build up the infrastructure or build up the water supply to have enough adequate water to each home. We should do the same for this facility here. Thank you.
We're well aware of those concerns. There was some preliminary reports filed by the railroad in what Mr. McInerney referred to earlier as the fire safety analysis, where they measured the pressure that comes out of the new water main that is on Westboro Road. But as has been said before, we will work, if this goes through and is built, we will work with them and the state fire marshal to make sure that this thing is built as safe as it can be. The water cannons are in the right place, that there's protection for the firefighters, that we have everything that we need. If it's going to be foam suppression, that the runoff is factored in, and all of that information. All right, third time's a charm. So I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. We will do our best to continue to improve communication and make sure everybody is aware of what's going on. I have a feeling that the local press will be covering the activities of the week of the 14th, so feel free to look there, and we will do press releases as we see fit. Thanks again for coming.